Hey everybody, Brian from Witch Doctor here. Thank you for joining. We are doing a post-match debrief from a match that I shot this past weekend, which was a 100 and 200 yard match. First day was light varmint, second day was heavy varmint. It's part of the routine NBRSA match series, sanctioned matches that we hold here in the Pacific Northwest United States in Tacoma, Washington. And just going to go through some of the things that I did to prepare and some of the things that I did during the match to sort of let you know kind of what my thought process was and how I made some adjustments to do better. All right, so basically at the end of the match, I took first place, which got me this nice large trophy. This was the Allen Bench Memorial. Allen Bench is a great shooter here in the Pacific Northwest and left quite a legacy of great shooters. Some of them, you'll see their names here up on the Allen Bench Award block here, like Steve Kochtanich, Rich Graham, Jeff Yost, Del Bishop, and Larry Bowers, Mark Walker. Lots of really great shooters on this one. And then you see some more recent names of some other shooters, like Jeff Croce won it last year. He's fairly new to bench rest. This year I'll have to take this thing to get my name engraved in there. And then this is the take-home trophy for it. Anyway, so nice to win a match. But regardless of winning a match, I always go through the process of debriefing to see what lessons can I learn from it. Every shooting opportunity to me is what I call dope, data on previous engagement, and I always review that to see what happened. How did I do things that led to larger groups? How did I do things that did really well? How do I continue to do good things? How do I modify or alter my practice to do better things? So it's part of a performance improvement orientation that I go through, and it has served me well. A lot of things that I've improved were pretty easy to figure out, but and that's usually the first few years of my match shooting was pretty easy to figure out some of the things that I did to make groups bigger or scores larger, or excuse me, smaller. And so anyway, I go through this process all the time anyway because it helps me to improve. Okay, so we started with initial load development, which was done a couple weeks ago. Whenever I do load development, I'm always using, I have this target here that I have made. Well, actually, the bones of the target you can get online on accurateshooter.com, but I have added a lot of different variables. Here it's date, cartridge, neck, distance, temperature, humidity, barometric or station pressure. Altitude is always the same. I'm shooting just about at sea level. Any velocity data I think I need to collect. The type of bullet, powder, rifle, what barrel is it, and the charge and seating depth. All these different things I collect on my targets to make sure I'm keeping track of all my data. I also have my data books, so I always keep data in a data book. I have one book per barrel. These books have probably 50 pages on it. By the time I get done with a barrel, it'll be full. Anyway, a lot of lessons learned in the data book too. So initial load development went well. I have this rifle here. It is the rifle that I'm using to do a tuner test. Similar to the last tuner test that I did on a different rifle, I'm using the same kind of method of testing. I'm doing initial load development with the tuner on and screwed on completely. I take it to a match to verify that it is, a good initial load. And if after the match it is, then I go ahead and I'll be proceeding with turning the tuner. I got first place in this match and shot pretty good. When I didn't shoot good, I knew exactly why. So I think this load is really good. I did have to make one minor adjustment, which I'll explain in a little bit. So I think we are ready to start turning the tuner on this thing and begin testing this tuner. Okay, so after fire forming the brass, I went ahead and went to some initial testing and I found some really good results really early on. Probably about 3 weeks prior to the match, where at a low load, I found really good groups. I basically these were just my first firings of fire formed brass, and they did extremely well. One of the reasons why they did well right away was I was using a PRP bullets, the Jokers. This is a short match grade bullet made by PRP bullets in a 790 jacket, which means they're pretty short. That's why they're called short. The ones in the 825 jacket are just the standard. That bullet I knew shot really well, 2 thousandths off the land. So I'm using what I call the known load method at this point. I already know these bullets shoot good from a certain distance off the lands, and it's just a matter of getting the powder charge right on them. So did some load development with relatively low loads, and then I did some load development with hotter loads. And so at the hotter end of the spectrum, I was getting pretty darn good groups. So I, at this point, decided I'm going to go with the hotter loads. And that's based on my experience with the Joker, that it seems to keep a good tune throughout a day with really hot loads. So I went ahead and chose the hot loads. And that actually was kind of true, because when I went back the day before the match and shot the low loads, you can see I've got a lot of vertical on 29 and a lot of horizontal on 29-1 that I wasn't getting when I shot them a couple weeks prior. But when I went to the hot loads, I was getting much smaller groups. So even 30.1 at 100 yards did a nice little small hole there. Went to 200 and shot 29.9 and had a lot of horizontal, and then went back and tried again. I saw some wind flags moving a little bit, didn't think it was a big deal, but I thought, well, I'm going to wait until the flags die completely and then shoot another group. This time I shot a 5-shot group. This was only a 3. And there was some horizontal, but not a whole lot. So I settled on 29.9. I probably, well, you should verify your load with more than just, a 3 and a 5-shot group, but I didn't have time. I actually had to leave the range, go do something, and then come back in the late afternoon and just do a quick final test, which was this one and these ones. So I wish I could have spent all day at the range. If I would have confirmed with more than just 1 3 and 1 5-shot group. Probably, I do recommend at least confirming with 3 or more 5-shot groups. If all 3 5-shot groups are doing well, probably don't need to go forward with more, but never a bad idea to shoot up to 5 or 7 5-shot groups to really confirm that that's a great load. Okay, and I shot using my new March scope. This is the Lou Murtica reticle. If you've watched my videos before, you've heard me talk about it. It's the March Highmaster 48 magnification 52 millimeter objective, and it has what's called the Lou Murtica reticle, which is a raised reticle. So it's a reticle where, let's see, a standard scope, you have a circle, and then you have your crosshairs. In this one, the crosshairs are raised, and I have a dot in mine. So the reason why this reticle is nice for this type of shooting is I can see my wind flags down here. My last 2 or 3 flags. Actually, I think I saw 4 of them from the bottom of the reticle, from the farther flags. The flags that are closest I can easily see right off of my scope. If I'm just keeping both eyes open, I can see the 4 flags in front, and then through the scope I can see the 4 flags in back. So that's the strategic advantage of using this raised reticle, which is why I waited until it came out and then sold some scopes so that I can be able to afford to purchase this one. Now, in terms of flags, while we're on the topic, your most important flags are usually the ones closest to you. Those ones have the most impact on the trajectory of the bullet. So what I typically do when I shoot a match is I pay very close attention to the front, the first 100 yards of flags. Or if I'm shooting a 300-yard match, the first 150 yards of flags. Close attention to those, because those are going to be more predictive of the trajectory of the bullet than the flags farther away. And so typically, and what I noticed when I shot my groups is I had better groups when the first 100 yards or first 50 yards of the flags were relatively dead or still. There were some flags in the back, at 50 to 100 yards for 100-yard shooting, or from 100 to 200 at 200-yard shootings that may still have been moving around a little bit when I took my shots, but they didn't impact the trajectory of the bullet as much as you would think. So anyway, the back flags are important, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I've had matches where one particular flag, if I'm shooting at 300 yards, the one at 150 is the biggest predictor of impact. I mean, you never know. You have to kind of study your flags, take notes, and reflect back on your notes to figure things out. In this particular match, on this particular day, the first 4 flags, whether that was from 0 to 50 at 100 yards or from 0 to 100 at 200 yards, were absolutely the most important. Okay, and so one of the other things about atmospheric conditions is I did my load development in atmospheric conditions that were almost identical to the match conditions. And I actually looked at the forecast for the 2 days that the match was being held and saw that they were very similar to the day before when I did final load development. So I went into the match fairly confident that the loads I was using were going to hold and that the atmospherics were not going to sort of throw those off to any appreciable degree. I knew I may have to make small adjustments, but nothing huge. Anyway, so let's get to looking at some targets here. One thing that I want to point out with this target is my sighter, which is a target that you use to sort of get on paper, figure out what the wind effects are, see how they're grouping initially. And I can tell you right now, with most of my sighter targets, my first shot, my cold bore shot, was always low. So that told me right there that the cold bore shot is going to go low. So kind of ignore that shot, basically. What you could do if you want to ignore it completely is maybe shoot it, in some area on your target that's not even close to your aiming point. Definitely don't shoot above this line here if you're using your sighter, because you get a penalty, but shoot somewhere below here where you can get rid of that first shot and let it go low. If that's the case with your barrel, I don't know. Learn your barrels, figure it out. Anyway, so what I did is put a note in my data book that said, cold bore shot is always low. So that tells me right there I can't just immediately go up to record and shoot my 5-shot group. I got to at least shoot one. In these kind of conditions that I had for this match this weekend, it was super windy. I mean, the flags were pretty much always moving, except for certain lulls, and I'll talk about those in a minute. But so what I do with the sighter is, obviously use it for my cold bore shot, which here it landed low. And I use it to see how it's grouping with fairly consistent winds. So if the flags are pointing left and the tails are pointing left, I'll use this sighter target because this is the left-hand side of the target. If they're pointing right, I'll use this sighter, which is the right side. If they're dead still, I'll use this main sighter area here. So you can see this tells me, since I used this sighter, that the flags were moving left, which quite often in both days of the match, we had a lot of left condition. So probably you'll see most of my shots are going to be on this sighter target. Anyway, so the cold bore went low. These two ended up getting close. And so I decided at that point, okay, I'm going to wait for either a left condition or a lull and then shoot my group. What I ended up doing is waiting for a bit of a lull. I was able to... I keep my cell phone on the bench next to me with a timer on. So when the first match of the day, you get for 100 yards, you get 10 minutes, and then you get 7 minutes for the other 4. And then the second match of the day at 200 yards, you get 10 minutes on the first match and then 7 minutes for the next four. And it's that way for all four of the sessions throughout the weekend. So I watch the timer and I watch the conditions as they roll in. So basically this weekend, there was a rhythm of the conditions that was occurring about every 4 to 5 minutes, somewhere in there. And so if you got a condition that was present for maybe a minute, and then you start the match and you have, let's say, 7 minutes, you could wait a little while, like wait, 3-4 minutes to let that condition, if it's inconsistent, let it ride. And there were a lot of inconsistent conditions, which means like the wind blew in and it was blowing flags right, left. Some of them were left, but intensities varied quite a bit. They were moving like this. And typically, though, after about 4 to 5 minutes, things started dying down, or the conditions got much more consistent, where there was a more consistent left-hand wind. And so I waited until the conditions were either more consistent or were very mild in nature. And so anyway, ended up shooting a little bit above a quarter MOA on my first record. Not too happy about that, but I wasn't, going to cry over it. And note that this is at a powder charge of 30.1, so I'm using a stout load here. Did the same second target, same thing, but it looks like flags were moving to the right, and then at some point there was a bit of a lull. And then went to record. Again, over a quarter MOA, so not too happy. So I'm going to go over what I should have done about this. Actually, on this target, I should have changed my load. I did that on the next 100-yard set of matches, and it worked great. But I didn't. This is one of my lessons learned. I did not adjust the load. I should have. Anyway, this is telling me that I had right and left conditions. And it looks like I went up to, the cider record target and shot a couple small ones, probably 2 or 3. Went up to record and one holed 4 shots, but one leaked out to the right. So that may have been, I'll bet you that was just I missed a let up on the wind. Okay. And again, same thing in the 2s. Not extremely happy about that performance, but what you have to understand is the wind was going so much in this match that everybody else's scores weren't that much better. So I didn't do too terribly bad here, even though I'm not very impressed with mid or even high 2s. 220. So on the fourth match, got a little bit better. I was feeling a little more confident with that load. Notice the cold bore shot was low. Okay, last match, again, cold bore shot low. And at this point, I was just taking single shots to see where's it going when it's pushing left, where's it going when it's pushing right. You can see the point of impact difference here between left and right. When it's right, it tends to drop the bullet. When it's left, the bullet tends to go up. You can see the clear point of impact difference there. And then finally it was like, okay, it's, I'm ready for record here. It looks like conditions were either very consistent or they calmed down. And then I shot a 1.133. So I finished out feeling pretty good at 100 yards. Okay, and then we began the 200 yard in the afternoon. And again, conditions they didn't improve. They just continued to stay pretty bad. And, so anyway, that was my cold bore shot. You can see I kind of took it in an area of the cider target that was kind of not near the 3 center holes here. And you can tell it is lower than my next warm-up shot, which looks like I had left conditions. And then I shot one, looks like maybe when conditions were a little calmer. Went up to record and shot a .443, which, again, is not that bad compared to other people's scores. And one thing that I do is not only are my individual targets data for me, but also when I go to what's called the whaling wall, where all of our targets for all the shooters are posted on the board, I look around at all those. That's all data to me. And when I saw a lot of people had a very similar pattern to mine, with a few clustered together, maybe one pop out here or there, it was like, okay, there was a lot of horizontal dispersion. It was, okay, the winds are pretty bad and hard to predict at times. And so a 443 was a pretty darn good group at 200 for this day. Same thing. 378 was a superb group for the amount of wind. I think we very rarely had a let up. I think there may have been one match, maybe two, where all of a sudden the flags went still. You couldn't feel any wind on the back of your head, and you knew this is a really still condition. So shooting a 378 5-shot group at 200, was very competitive that day. Unfortunately, I probably missed a change in the condition and probably had a right-hand wind that dropped a bullet. Same thing here. I had probably shot in two separate conditions. Now my sighter was really good on the what probably was a consistent left, and I probably started shooting on a consistent left and holed probably 3 in one hole, and then there's probably a let up at that point that was really hard to determine, given that all the flags were just moving in different intensities and various directions. So this was not an uncommon pattern on this fourth match. You can see people was like, oh, I shot in two different conditions. And that's kind of what we joke about. This one, probably just a simple miss, totally missed a let up of a right-hand wind. You can see how my bullets are shooting more to the right. You can even see my sighter where I sighter targeted on right condition. So this was a right condition target, and they all went right, and then all of a sudden there was either a let up where the winds died down quite a bit, and then bam, went right into there. Again, hard to see, when the flags are constantly always moving. It's very hard to detect let ups, and so a lot of shooters got caught on some let ups, and I definitely got caught on a let up there. And that, again, try not to do it, but in certain conditions when the flags are just always moving around, it's hard, really hard to see, hard to detect. Okay, day 2, I kept the same load at 200. I had looked at all the different scores at 200, and I saw that I'm still competitive here. I don't know, I think I may have, oh, that's a 2-gun aggregate. That's ag for 1-200. 1-200. So like at 200 yards, I was holding, I got second place in the 200-yard ag. So I wasn't too worried about my load. I thought, it probably is a good load, and just everyone struggled with conditions, and I just, did a little bit better with them and got second place, on that yardage that day. I'm keeping that load. And so on the first one, it looked like conditions may have been fairly calm on this first match, because I have a shot in my center sighter target there, and went down and confirmed some on the right. Looks like it probably moved to the right a little bit, and shot a 228, which is a screamer. Anything 5 shot at 200 yards less than .249 is considered a screamer, a super small group. That helped me a lot. And I was actually the match winner too on that particular match. A small group like this helps quite a bit, so I was very happy with it. I knew it's going to give me a little bit of leeway. If I screw something up later, it'll help me to keep my group scores low. So I was very, very pleased with this one. And then you can see here I was dealing with a right condition and didn't do as well. You can see some horizontal, and then one pop up. A left condition. One popped up, that probably because either the left condition let up or it went right. The winds were switching so much that it probably was something, either let up or the winds just started pushing right. I don't know for sure. But again, this pattern was not too uncommon on the Wailing Wall. Next match Looks like there was probably a left condition again. The cold bore shot again dropped lower. And then on my middle sighter, got one right there and thought, okay, they're sort of predictably moving in that left direction. And I shot what was a fairly consistent, probably mild to moderate left, and got a 357, which was a pretty good again for the conditions there. And now, here's where I made the big mistake, and this has to do with timing the conditions. Okay, so knowing sort of how long the condition rolls in. This match, we had this condition where flags were going everywhere. I mean, it was very unpredictable. 3 flags would be left, full force. 2 flags would be right, full force. 1 would be dead or completely calm. And so in that kind of conditions, it's very hard to understand, like, where is my bullet going to go? But I knew in my head, that this condition will probably pass in anywhere from 3 to 4 minutes or so. The condition will pass, and so I waited. And the mistake that I made was I did not look at the timer on my cell phone to see how much more time I had left for this match, because you have only 7 minutes for the match. So I did not look. I waited. I heard some people firing, shots when that bad condition had a lull, but I thought I'm going to wait, because the lull didn't even seem that good to me either, because the flags were still moving, although a lot less and a lot less intense. And unfortunately, that waiting period and forgetting to check my timer was just destroyed me. And so I only had about 30 seconds left, and the second condition was still highly active. It was highly variable. Flags were moving in all kinds of different directions. Pretty much low predictability as to where that bullet is going to fly. But I only had 30 seconds to left, so I just quickly ran 5 shots, and this is what I got. I got a 933, which is monstrous. I don't think this was the biggest group on match 4, but it was pretty darn close, and I knew, crap, that's going to kill me. Luckily, though, like I said, this tiny group kind of saved my ag. Saved my ass. Anyway, so that's the big take-home with looking at these targets is keep a close eye on your timer and make sure when you're timing the conditions, when you get that lull, just shoot it. This rifle was shooting good. This load was shooting good. I mean, I had a good tune. Just shoot it. And actually, in fact, after this match, the person sitting on the bench next to me turned to me because he was watching me shoot my group. He was done. He shot it during the mild lull. And he turned to me and he was like, I thought you were going to shoot what I shot. And I said, I was about to do that. And I delayed because I thought I'll wait for either a more consistent condition or another lull. And it didn't happen because I only had like 3 minutes left when the condition shifted. So my timing was off and I didn't look at my timer. And he said, yep, there you go. He was like, that basically, I don't want to say a rookie mistake, but certainly this is a big lesson learned for this match. Okay, and then went into the final match. And probably just missed a switching condition. Again, the conditions were so switchy that it was very common for shooters to, have 1 or 2 kind of outside. And we joke about it. We shot two groups, because you thought the conditions were very similar or the same. But since all the flags are moving, it's hard to detect. And you end up kind of having either 1 leak out or 2 leak out. So that was 200. Okay, now the afternoon at 100, I used the same load that I used at 100 the day before, which was 30.1, and I noticed on my sighter, I got some vertical there. Went ahead and just went up and shot the record, a solid quarter MOA. Again, not super disappointed because of, again, the wind. It was like, this is not bad, so kind of just said, okay, I'm going to keep this load. Next one, shot a 282. You can see one leaked out. Same thing on my sighter, though. That actually could have been the cold bore shot. So it went low and then it grouped good. I'd used the center sighter, so that tells me conditions were probably okay. But had one leak out here. May have missed a condition, or the load just may have been slightly off. So a 282 is, anytime I have a sighter in the center here, that tells me I'm shooting in pretty good conditions. I should get a small one. Didn't happen. And so at this point, I decided I'm going to go ahead and change the load. I can't be super competitive if I shoot the rest of these matches at this, quarter MOA or a little bit higher. I need to be well below, a quarter MOA in order to remain competitive. And so that's what I did. I ended up adjusting load. Now, I had in my data book the different loads from before, and I knew, okay, 30 did okay during load development. I couldn't go up too much because I was already pretty high at 30.1. So I decided, okay, I'm going to make a slight adjustment and bring it down to 30. Now, I should have done this on day 1 at 100 yards, which was another lesson learned, is that I must have just been complacent or not thinking and didn't make the adjustment. I just kept the 30.1. Maybe I was too stubborn. I don't know. But that's the second big lesson learned here, is that I should have made this adjustment on day 1. I should have went down to 30 because I was not shooting below quarter MOA on that. So came back the next match with 30. On the sighter, they did well. Now, mind you, I did keep 5 shots of 30.1 just in case 30 did bad, but 30 did really good. I had 3 shot groups in my sighter that lined up pretty good. And then I went up to record and shot a .141. So that one ended up being the match winner for this particular match. So that was good news. I thought, okay, great. I'm back on track. I'm going to go ahead and keep it at 30. Okay, and then shot the 4th match. Got a little over a quarter MOA, but again, looking at other people's targets, talking to other people, they said, yeah, it was bad conditions, and everyone kind of shot a big round group. So I thought, okay, it was probably conditions that opened me up a little bit, and I went ahead and maintained the 30 grain group, 30 grain load. And on the last match, shot a .189 with that load. So in comparing scores, my group size is at 100 yards the day before. I had a much smaller 100-yard ag the second day because I made the adjustment. If I would have made this adjustment on day 1, I probably would have had a better 100-yard ag that day. Now, it wasn't terrible. Again, like I said, I think I took 3rd on that 100-yard ag the day before, so it wasn't terrible. The wind was so bad, everybody was shooting big groups, so, but definitely noticed here that making that adjustment to 30 got me into the ones on 2 of the targets, at least 2 of the 3. And then this 4th one, was attributable to just bad conditions all the way around. Very hard to predict. Okay, and final lesson learned is brass prep. These are Lapua cases. I typically don't compete with Lapua cases. I don't like them because I have to turn them down, turn the necks down. The necks are too thick to run in my 268 neck. I don't like turning necks. And the second thing that I don't like about the Lapua cases is case capacity. In my Norma cases, I usually get pretty good case capacity. I can stuff that thing with 30.6 of N133. With these Lapua cases, I get a lot less case capacity, 30.2, and the powder column is, really high up on the neck. Even with a 12-inch drop tube and dropping it really, really slow. So for those reasons, I don't normally run Lapua, but since this is like a test rifle for tuner testing, I went ahead and let's go ahead and use my Lapua cases. I'll use Lapua for testing and then Norma for matches. I went ahead and just used this in the match anyway because the match was literally part of my testing for the tuner. So one mistake that I made, and I don't know why I could have made this mistake, but a lot of people advise when they turn necks is to take a little bit off of the neck shoulder junction. So bring the your neck turner all the way down, and then a little bit into the neck shoulder junction. And there's a angled carbide cutter that kind of sits at the angle of the shoulder to sort of remove some off of the shoulder, and prevents you from digging too far into the shoulder. Now I have that, and I was using that when I cut these necks. But what happened is some of them cut a little bit too far into the neck. And actually, when I took the case to the loading bench where I was reloading, I take steel wool and I clean off the neck with the steel wool. One of the cases, I pull it out, and the neck stayed in the steel wool, and the body of the brass came out. So it actually separated. I had complete neck case separation. And so what I started doing is inspecting my brass really closely after firing, because I thought, oh man, if one of these brass pieces had case neck separation, then some of the others may. And I ended up finding pieces of brass where I can take my pinky nail here and feel a line in between there where it's like, oh man, took too much off that neck shoulder junction, and this case is at risk of separating. So I started the match with about 45 cases and ended the match with only 25 or so, because I literally had to throw away those cases that were showing that line in there. This one doesn't show the line. And in fact, one other thing that I do recommend is that you purchase one of these nifty little things here where it enables you to see really closely, like you back up there. So you can see a slight line, but when I go and feel it, I don't feel any difference. So that line is probably means that it's cut to where it's consistent with the neck thickness overall. In the ones that I was seeing case neck separation, you not only had the line, but you can easily feel where, oh, whoa, there's like a divot in the neck there where it seems like it cut too much. So anyway, I like having one of these magnifier lamps. They help me see these small things. I do recommend them. But anyway, during the match, I didn't have a magnifier lamp, so I just sort of used my fingernail and sort of was able to feel that. So lesson learned, don't cut too deep into that neck shoulder junction. You'll probably have some case neck separation if you do. Okay, so final thoughts are, number one, do recommend that you sort of debrief in this manner after every match. It's part of what I call a performance improvement process, where I'm constantly looking for ways to improve. And I have absolutely zero shame in acknowledging if there was a mistake made. And so I go through just what did I do? What needs improvement? What should I not do? And what I found for this match in particular, even though I won, it doesn't matter. Every match is a learning experience. Every shooting episode is a learning experience. Handful of things that I'm taking home here. Definitely the closer flags have a bigger impact on the trajectory of the bullet. Now that doesn't mean that the flags farther away are not important. That just means pay close attention to those first set of flags. And the other big lesson learned is know your loads really well, keep written notes, and be confident in making adjustments. Like I said, if I would have made that adjustment at 100 yards on day one, my 100-yard ag would have been better. I probably would have taken, instead of third place, I probably could have placed first on that ag, but instead I kept the same load and took third. The next day after I made the adjustment, it improved my ag dramatically to where I think I got like first or second at 100 yards for the ag. So know your loads well and be confident in your adjustment. Again, I knew that the load is good, the tune's good. I'm only going to require a really small amount of adjustment. There's other times where I know I have to do a large adjustment, but this time I knew it was small, and it was. It was just an adjustment from 30.1 of N133 to 30. The other big thing is observing the patterns in the conditions and paying attention to the timing of those conditions and paying attention to some sort of timing device. if you go down the benches at matches like this, you'll see a lot of people that have their timers, somewhere attached to their wrist. I don't know, on different. I use my cell phone because it's easy just to put it right next to me, and it's a big screen so I can see the numbers easily. Pay close attention to that. The one time where my attention lapsed was a massive group, and it could have really, could have really destroyed my ag. Luckily, I still placed, I think, in like the second place in that 200-yard ag, despite that monstrous group. But I knew for sure that was a mistake. I should have kept a close eye on that, and I should have shot in those fairly predictable or mild to moderate conditions. And one other thing, being careful when you're turning your neck so you don't turn too far into that neck-shoulder junction. So 4 really good take-homes that I took home from this match that I will be using in future matches to improve my performance. So thank you, everybody. Hope you all have a wonderful match season if you're a match shooter or just shooting in general. Please subscribe, like, and share. And also, please join my Patreon. I have tons of video clips that I put on there that are exclusive to Patreon that you're not able to see on YouTube. So if you find any of this stuff valuable, I do a lot more on Patreon than I do YouTube. So please come on over and join. Okay, thanks, everyone. Take care.